So up to this point, I've been having you think through the different stories you're looking at and to especially think in broad terms about your topics. And over the next week or two, we're going to be focusing a little more specifically on two things, both on the exact stories you're going to be doing and also on how to get information through interviews. And here in this piece, I want to talk about how you put together a source list. You've got to remember that stories are about people. They're not about things, they're not about cool new records, they're not about the physical stuff. It's about how things are affecting people in the world. And so the key task you have is to understand what your story is and find people to help tell their stories in a way that makes people understand what it is that you're trying to write about. If you remember, if you look back at the assignment sheet, that I'm going to expect you to have 5 sources per story. Some professors in Grady have a lot more people that they expect you to have in stories. Some people have a lot fewer, but this is where we're situated here. So of those 5 people, I expect to see at least one outside expert, at least one local expert, and at least one real person. Only 3 of your 5 need to be quoted, but I need to see documentation that you've talked to or had conversations with at least 5 people. So what these experts are, how they play out, this all depends on the kind of story you happen to be writing about. And I'm going to go through each of our story assignments for this semester and talk also a little bit about how those sources can be used in context of a particular story. First off, in your trend and innovation story, remember you're talking about something that's happening, something new that's going on in your area. So who knows the specific details about this particular trend and how it's playing out here in Athens or your particular domain? That's your local expert, obviously. The outside expert is a person who can provide broader context for how the situation is playing out, for what the history is, how it's affecting people, etc. And then to talk to someone for whom the trend has real-world implications. That's what I mean by a real person. When I was in journalism school, we talked actually about RPs, about finding someone, basically a person on the street. And I hate those man-on-the-street interviews they do on TV and whatnot, but it is important to talk to people on the ground, so to speak, people who are actively involved in whatever the situation is that you're writing about. So here's an example. I want to write a story about Georgia Southern football moving to the Football Bowl subdivision. This is the big time of college football. It's not the SEC, but they are talking about moving from the FCS, what used to be known as 1AA, which is sort of the middle tier of college football, or the higher middle tier, to the top tier of the Football Bowl subdivision. And I'm going to explain how different stories I write in this particular topic area might play out depending on what kind of story you're writing. So if I'm just writing about the trend of schools moving to Division I and FBS football, then I want to situate the story within Georgia Southern specifically, and I might talk as local experts to the Georgia Southern athletic director, the president, and also the most recent former Georgia Southern AD basically resigned because he didn't think it was a good idea to move up, to upgrade. But the president strongly believed it, so I think he probably has something interesting to say about it. In terms of outside experts, people who can provide that broader context, I might talk to conference commissioners, longtime observers, NCAA staff, and people like that. In terms of real people and who is going to be affected by Georgia Southern moving up and spending more money on football, I'll probably talk to current athletes about what they think about this. I know what they probably think about it. I'm sure they're really excited about it. Current students who are probably going to get charged a lot more money to, as part of athletic fees. You guys pay, I think, $50 a semester in athletic fee at Georgia. But at other schools that are in the process of moving up, they can pay up to several $100s per semester in athletic fees. And all that is just to finance athletics, so it's a transfer from one group of students to another. And I might talk to a recruit and someone who might be looking at this school and excited about the move, or maybe not so excited about the move. For the news analysis story, remember the assignment is to take a piece of hard news, an event or a development in your area, and explain what it means and why it's important. So for this, you're going to be talking to people who are directly involved in this piece of news, in the event or circumstance, and that's your local analysis. someone who can provide more local history or context for what's happening here in the area and why this is happening, and then someone who can provide a broader perspective or some contrast to show how something similar has played out elsewhere. So again, let's say that I reinterpret the story to do a news analysis on the announcement that Georgia Southern is moving to the Football Bowl subdivision. Assuming I've gotten all the basic information, then I want to talk to people with direct involvement, again like the president or the AD, to get some local context from people in Statesboro, longtime fans, other folks like that, and broader context by talking to people who have also made the jump from the FCS to the FBS. So schools that have made the jump, schools that have not made the jump, and maybe some administrators, people like that. Then for your final story, your profile, the thing you've got to remember about a profile is that it's not just about, hey, this is a really cool person. These are all the things that make her cool or him cool. But you've got to say something about why this person is worth writing a story about. Is it something they've accomplished? Is it a condition that other people are going to find interesting or useful? Is it some kind of unusual condition or circumstance? And what it is, sort of the backstory or the broader story that you're using your profile subject to fit in, that's going to determine the people that you need to talk to. So folks like that, I've got this little list here. There's obviously your profile subject, himself or herself, someone who also is involved in this situation, or someone who is a peer or knows about the current thing that you're trying to write about, the broader story. Someone else who may or may not be involved in the broader story but knows the person well, can talk to who they are as a person, their personal qualities, and sort of their history that's relevant. And then someone who can speak to the broader context of the issue, of the situation, or whatever the subject is involved with. So back to my Georgia Southern example. The current coach is a guy named Jeff Monken, who has been there for about 3 years. And maybe I want to write the profile from the standpoint of, or for the broader story, is he the guy to help Georgia Southern make this leap to FBS football? So obviously I've got to talk to him. For a colleague, I might talk to the current AD to talk about how he feels about this coach and how things are going as they make this transition. And then get personal background. Monken is a guy who worked for Paul Johnson, who's the current Georgia Tech coach, who is well known for running a particular style of offense called the triple option. And I'm not going to get into the X's and O's of that, but it's fairly innovative and can cause some schools problems, although obviously Georgia has not had much of a problem with it in recent years. But Johnson would be a great person to talk about Monken and the challenges that he's going to face. And again, the same thing with a current player or a recent player. A lot of times it's good to get people who are out of the specific situation or have been for a little while, because they're going to be a little bit freer to talk. A current player may still be intimidated by his coach and not want to talk, but someone who has graduated recently is likely to be more honest, one way or the other. And for broader context, I might talk to people about the style of football, about the coach's personal makeup. Does he have the resources to be able to recruit athletes and do what it takes to be successful at the next level? So things to think about when you are putting together your source list. How are you going to get in touch with this person? Are you going to friend them on Facebook? Are you going to send them an email? Are you going to call them? Generally speaking, the best thing you can do is going to be to set up a face-to-face interview, but that can't always work, so sometimes you may need to talk to folks over the phone. Really, live conversation, and we'll talk about this more later in terms of interviews, are always going to be your better choice. But if you have to rely on emails or texts or social media messages, that can sometimes be okay. It just depends on the quality of information you get out of them. Then finally, especially in the wake of the Manti Te'o hoax and the fact that a lot of reporters were taken in by the same hoax that Te'o himself allegedly was taken in by, it's always important to think about with your source list, is there one more person you can call? Is there another person who might be able to provide enough of an outside perspective to enable you to understand what's really happening? Again, if the reporters who wrote about Manti Te'o had really verified the details of the alleged girlfriend's actual life, if she'd gone to Stanford, if they found arrest reports, then they would have moved forward. If they didn't find those things and raised a red flag, then none of this would have happened. So always be thinking about that extra phone call to triangulate the information that you've received, as you can find an outside source that's going to confirm what you've heard. Your final list is going to be something like this that shows the list of people you're going to talk to, how to get in touch with them. In some cases, obviously, you may need to go through PR people if you're talking to people at corporations or universities or things like that. But you put down your list like this and include all the information, and then you've got a list that you can work down as you're starting to build your interview questions. So that's about it with Sourcelists. As always, let me know if you have any issues or questions, and we will go from here.